Good morning, everybody. My name is Bea, and I am a very grateful alcoholic. You look wonderful. You really look very nice and alive and full of all the energy that Yvonne said that I have. And I hope that those of you who are in your beds this morning, I hope I'll speak loudly enough to wake you up so that I can have my little retaliation that I rehearsed for at 2 o'clock this morning. I also want to say that if my God were to appear to me right now, and I don't know why she doesn't, that's good. That's called progress. And if my God were to say to me, Bea, is there any place else you would prefer to be than to be here right now? I would say, no, thank you. This is just fine. This fits me very well. I'm very grateful to you for inviting me. As I was trying to recall yesterday how I got invited here, what I remembered was that I got a phone call in the middle of the night from a man from Dublin. And I never know because I get weird, strange phone calls from men all over the world. But I thought he was my brother, as a matter of fact, because my brother lives in Dublin. And he asked me to come here. And I couldn't remember the next morning whether I had this dream about a man from Dublin or whether it was true. But anyway, I finally got to meet the man from Dublin sitting down here called Calamity. And he's responsible for this, so it's his problem. I want to thank the two wonderful ladies, Jeanette and Yvonne, who met me at the airport yesterday. For those of you who don't know me, and some of you don't, I consider myself to be the queen of orphans. I revert into an orphaned state almost immediately. And if you leave me and don't pay attention to me and don't take good care of me, I immediately think I'm abandoned. So it was wonderful for me to get off the airplane yesterday and see these two ladies here with their big sign up so that everybody at the airport could know that I was here, and get escorted back here. And then when I got here to meet so many old and wonderful friends, people I met last year at Lafayette, and people I've met through speaking all over the country, and just to be here in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And especially I'm thankful for meeting a new friend called Miriam, whom I think I spent some time in another life with because we just connected almost immediately. And for all those things, I'm awfully grateful to be here today and to be able to share with you what the blessings that God has given me through this wonderful fellowship. Everything in my life was marvelous until I was 2. And for those of you who don't remember a way back when you were 2, just keep coming back to the program. Because there is a phrase we use frequently in the program. It's called Get Honest. And this program, as you know, is a program of rigorous honesty, which doesn't come real naturally to me. But when I recall my early childhood memories, I can remember what happened to me when I was 2. And what happened to me when I was 2 was that my little sister was born. And for some reason, and I will never know why, my parents never asked my permission. They simply went on having babies every year. We're Irish and Catholic. And we had these babies, and it seemed that every time there was a baby into the family, my place was taken. And my place always has been, since I can recall, in the center. If you're wanting ever to read about me, there's a paragraph about me on page 62 of the big book. I should say, the big book. I will be saying that a couple of times today, Scott. It's on page 62. There's just a little paragraph about me. It says that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. And I somehow had the expectation from as far back as I can remember that I was supposed to be in the center. My parents never told me that they didn't want me. And I think they provided very well for me. but I never felt part of, even in those little early years when I was trying to be a little girl. I felt separate, different, apart from, but never told anybody that because I didn't know how. I didn't get that language of the heart or that language of communication until I met people like you. Then when I got to be to the wonderful age of 8 years old, my father went to work one day and he never did come home because he was killed in an accident. And a tree had fallen on top of him in the woods and killed him almost instantly. And as I think back on that event, I think it probably was much more traumatic than I ever knew then. And I didn't know how to do grief or mourning or loss or any of the things that we learn so well how to do today. But what I knew was that my father was gone and my mother was 32 and she was widowed. And she took me aside one day. In fact, I think it was the day after my daddy's funeral. And she said, "Bea, I want you to help me to raise these children." And I know exactly what I did that day. I put away my dolls and all the things that I did as a little girl and all my playthings, and I started about this business of growing up. And I would love to tell you that I came all the way from California yesterday and that I was grown up. Unfortunately, I'm not there yet, but I think I have a good chance if I stick around you. And so, I started to do the things that she taught me to do, like clean and cook and babysit, and she was a school teacher. And so she taught me how to do lots of school teachery sorts of things. And I became, in fact, I think what she taught me was, but I didn't know, and I don't think she ever said these words, but there's a little paragraph, I think it's page 61, and it says, "Is she not a victim of the delusion that she can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only she manages well?" And so I said about the business of managing well. Some people call it efficiency. Some people call it doing my own will. Some people call it running the show. And some people call it playing God. And so I moved into my teenage years, and I did what most people do when they get to be teenagers. I started to think about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And what I decided to do in my teenage years, I decided to do something quite spectacular with my life, and that was I made a decision then to become a saint. And there is also in the big book a part that says that we're not saints. And I was rather perturbed when I read that first. But what I decided to do then, and it's a long time ago, longer than I'd like to remember, in fact it was 39 years ago in July 16th, I decided to become a Catholic nun. Now before I say another word, I want to say to you that there might be one person in this audience, in an audience this large, who might have a resentment against somebody like me. And if there is, I want to tell you immediately that I didn't do it to you. Thank you. But I also want to say, on behalf of the church to which I belong, which is the Catholic Church, I also want to publicly make amends to you for any of the hurts and harms that you have experienced at the hand of my church. And I want to tell you, because I will never see the boys and girls and the men and women that I could have hurt through the hands of my disease, I want to make amends to you as best I can at this time. And so I started about this lifestyle. I call it the nunny bunny business. And it was great. It was wonderful. I loved it. I still do like it a lot. And everything seemed to be going grand. You know, they were glad to get me because I could do things. I was kind of efficient by then. And they said they were going to let me continue my education and send me over to England. And so they sent me to the University of London to do my studies. In those days, that was a big deal. And so I went over there and I learned how to do everything. I became awfully smart, and I became very into education, all kinds of education, primary education, secondary education, and all sorts of facets of learning. And one of the things that was most exciting to me was to work with children and see their minds opening up and cracking up that whole business of adventure in their heads, and it was just so exciting. And I was assigned to teach in a public school in England. I was doing that rather well, and everything seemed to be going fairly okay, at least on the outside, except that there was something that happened in my insides. And I know that this has never happened to you, but I have to be honest about my story. And I have to tell you that what happened in my head was that there was a voice that would go off regularly. And the voice would say, if only they would shape up, I'd feel better. And so this voice got really loud, and at the same time there was a kind of a knot that would happen in my gut. And I really thought that if I could change the environment, or change the people with whom I lived, or change whatever it was, that I'd start feeling better. And so one day a wonderful thing happened in my life. I came home from school, and on our bulletin board there was a letter from our boss ladies, our superiors back in Ireland. And they had written a letter to say that they would like some of us to volunteer to go to California. And being the wonderful martyr that I was, and knowing that I would certainly feel better if I went to California, I signed up and I got picked. And so I set out for California on the 16th of August, 1964, 25 years ago this year. And my superiors at the time had wonderful taste, because they told me that they were going to put me in charge. Now, if you're a potential alcoholic and you're not feeling real good inside about yourself, and you know that something on the outside is going to fix you, there's nothing better sounding than that you're going to be in charge, because then you know it's going to work out okay. And so they told me they were going to put me in charge of the school principal, and I was going to be the mother superior in charge of all the nunny bunnies, and going to send me to California. And so I arrived there on August 16th or 17th, whenever, I can't exactly remember the day, but all I remember about California in the middle of August, with all the nunny bunny clothes. Have you seen people like me when we used to be dressed up in nunny clothes? You know, it was very, very hot. We were wearing long black serge garments and habits, and we were all covered over here with white starch. And I just knew that this was going to be wonderful, because I was now in California, even though I was very hot, and it was going to be great because I was in charge. And so everything went very well for about 5 days. And after 5 days, I was to meet somebody who was to be my arch enemy for many years afterwards. And he was known as the pastor. Now, some of you don't know what a pastor is, but I could tell you after the meeting. And anyway, I was to meet him, and, he had an interesting concept about me. He thought he was in charge, you see. He thought that. And I knew I was. And immediately we started to lock horns. We just got into it almost immediately. And I come from the north of Ireland, just a little bit over the border from where Malachy comes from. And I happen to be a Catholic too. And, in the north of Ireland, it's not very popular to talk about orange, the color orange, for political reasons, which I'm not allowed to talk about here. But anyway, this man, the pastor, he had painted the doors of the school, the new school, orange. And I just didn't think he had real good taste at all. And I started to think about how I could get rid of him. And I wrote letters in my head, and I planned speeches in my head, and I was going to confront him, and I was trying not to let anybody know what I was thinking, especially the people who were around there, the parents and the parishioners and the nunny bunnies, and I didn't want anyone to know that I was experiencing this conflict. And every time we got a chance, we were at each other's throats. But if you be alcoholic or chemically dependent in some way, and you've had to get fixed by a chemical, like I've had to get fixed by a chemical, you will appreciate what I'm going to say next, because a miraculous thing happened to me. And that was that a lady came to my office one day and she said, "Sister, would you like to have all the sisters come with you this evening and swim in our swimming pool?" And I said, some of you know that I do swimming. Ed can tell you how many laps I do. He counts them every time I come to a conference. Dirty old man. But anyway, we went over swimming to her house, and when we were all through, she came to the side of the pool, and she had a tray and a big pitcher and some glasses. And on the top of the glasses, there was salt. Oh, you're so smart. Some of you know what was in the pitcher. Well, I never had this before. Now, I had little glasses of wine prior to that, I think. I'm not real sure. But this stuff that was in the pitcher that I poured into the glass with the salt on the top, or she did, and I took a large gulp. I never did sipping. I don't know what it's like to sip alcohol. There might be some of you in this audience who know that. My sister knows how to do that, but I just don't know how to do that. So I gulped this stuff down me, and the thought I had was that I must have died and that I went straight to heaven. And I thought, where have I been all this time? Why would anybody ever want to go to work if you could get this? And suddenly it seemed like it was all going to be okay. My little sister, whom I resented back in Ireland, and all the different people who had done terrible things to me my whole life, and my relationship with my mom, who had given me so much responsibility, the pastor, everybody, they all looked fine. And I knew what my problem was. I knew I was overstressed, I was overworked, I was under a lot of pressure, and what I needed to do was to get this little beverage on a regular basis, and I would be okay. So I asked the lady if she would give me the recipe, and she gave me the recipe to take home. And for those of you who are new, and there are some of you who are fairly new, and you may or may not know this, denial is built into our disease. It's absolutely in our being, denial. We say in so many words, there's no such thing as a dragon. We're looking at it, but we don't know. And I thought, the nicest thing I could do for the Nunny Bunnies was to whip this recipe up as often as I could when I could get the ingredients, because they worked so hard. Well, they worked hard because I was their boss. And as our book says, I was an instigator not of harmony, but of confusion. Now, I didn't act like I was confusing everybody, but I would do things like, Fridays I'd say, I think we'd change our classrooms around. Let's put all the 8th graders into the 1st grade class and move all the desks. And let's put the 6th graders into the 3rd. And the teachers would go, what? What do you mean? And I'd say, change is good. It'll help everybody. I'd change things around. I love changing things. I always had lots of energy. And so I just thought if I could whip this up for these gals who worked very hard because I made them work hard, that they'd feel better. Now, if you ever want to get bored and you haven't finished drinking yet, let me tell you how to do that. Go and drink with a bunch of Nunny Bunnies. They're unbelievable. They're weird. They do the strangest things, at least the ones I lived with. They would take a drink and they would, they'd sip it. And then they'd take another little sip. And they would always say, let's have these little glasses. They were always into little glasses. And I was always interested in large containers. Like a flower pot maybe, something big. And the interesting thing that I know now, and I think it's the only sin that I know of, is that they never finished. They never finished their alcohol. And I used to come along after them and, drain their glasses into my pitcher, because I always had to provide for a rainy day, of which there were many. And I didn't know, I just knew that I wasn't drinking like they were, and I was always wondering when somebody was going to ask me when I could have another drink. But an interesting thing happened. The pastor came over to the convent one day, and he was in charge of the money. And it was kind of important, sort of to try to keep friends with him. But he came over one day and he said, is there anything you need? Fatal question to me. Because I would say, yes, we would need 10 more desks for the 8th grade classrooms, and we would like to change all this furniture over to here, and I had millions of requests. But this day I said to him, yes, as a matter of fact, we would like to have a bottle of tequila. And I will always remember the look on his face. He just, he looked. And he said, "Do you like that stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, we do, as a matter of fact. And we got it from Rose the other day. And we would like to have this, and I have the recipe, and I could make this." And he went away, and he came back in about 5 minutes with a big bottle of tequila. And I think he got it where they manufacture tequila, which was in the rectory where he lived. Now, I'm not sure, but it was. And he said, "We're having a little get-together with the priests in the area on Sunday. Would you all like to come over?" So, for some, none of you would be interested in this at all, but it's kind of interesting in putting it into place for myself. There was a movement happening in the Catholic Church. It was called Vatican II. Ever heard of that? Where that little roly-poly Pope stood at the window in the Vatican. His name was John the 23rd, and he said, "Let's get some fresh air into this stuffy old church. And let's find out what's going on in our church, in our hearts, and let's get interested in what's inside rather than external." He was talking about changing our hearts, what our program teaches us, incidentally. But he was talking about stuff like that, and he was saying, he was saying to people like me, "Oh, come on, relax a little bit." Now, what I thought he was saying was, "You can drink." I thought he meant that. And so I thought the more people that I knew who would drink and have alcohol, and the more parties I could go to, and the more social life I could have, and the more committees that I could sign up for and drink at the end, I thought that was Vatican II. I thought that was the changes in the church. Anyway, he invited us over to this little get-together we had over there, and I was amazed. I really was amazed. They had scotch and bourbon and vodka, and then they had all kinds of wine and after-dinner drinks, and I knew I was going to have to make make a complete psychic change towards this man, because I knew he had what I wanted. And so, in fact, I think the book talks about seeking lower companions. And so, what I decided to do was to get friends with him, to work hard for him, to do everything that he would want me to do as a good principal, and so that I could get my little drinky-poo as often and as much as I needed eventually. Well, that's how my drinking career started. And then people got to know that Sister B liked this little beverage occasionally, and there was this one man in particular. He owned a trailer down in Mexico, and he said to me one day, "If you would ever like to use that, you could take the sisters down there on weekends or on vacations or whatever." And he gave me the keys one day, and he said, "This is the key of the front door, and this is the key of the cabana. And, sister, this is the key of the liquor cabinet. Help yourself." Oh, what magic words. Help yourself. And I said, "Praise God, from whom all blessings flow." That is music to alcoholics' ears. For those of you who don't know, it's music to our ears when we know we can have this unlimited supply, where we're not going to be observed, where nobody's going to be asking us questions, where we're going to have what we need just to keep going. So I said to the Nunny Bunnies, "You know what? Pretty soon, more than 50% of the people in California will be Hispanic. And it will become mandatory for us to teach Spanish in our schools. So I think we need to go to Mexico as often as we can. And we need to learn Spanish. And we can go at weekends, and we can go long weekends, and we can go at vacation time. We've got this trailer down there. We get off there as often as we can, because God knows we came here to serve these people." And so we betook ourselves down there often, and my drinking career kind of started. And I knew it. I was so smart. I knew never to drink on the job. I never drank on the job. Never drank on the job. And I never drank and drove. But I picked my spots. Did you ever do reward drinking where you picked your spots? And you knew that because you worked so hard. And I would say to the Nunny Bunnies, "Are you tired?" And they'd say, "Well, we've had a hard week. We've had report cards." And so we got into lots of excuses for drinking. You can find them, when you give out report cards in the school. That's big stuff. When you do parent-teacher conferences, when the rain comes in California. That's when you really have to drink. And when the Santa Ana wind comes, and when it's very hot. And when a stray cat walks into the patio and has 9 kittens that you didn't expect. And the crises become welcome. And the kids would sometimes leave their uniforms lying around the yard, and the phone would ring often, and the pressure was getting bad. And the more pressure, the more cause to drink. And the nuns used to say to me in the evening, "You're so tired. God, you're so tired. You're exhausted." I'd say, "Yeah, I am. I'm really tired. It's been a hard day." And this one little enabler nun that I had, a great friend of mine today, and she used to say, "Well, you know, I think you need a drink." And God knows I need a drink. I need a drink so bad. But you know, something started to happen inside of me. And what happened inside of me is what happened inside of most of you. And that is that I started to die. It's always amazing to me when I see an audience this big, and I would love to know all your stories. I know some of your stories. I know Joe's story. I know a few of your stories. But I'd love to know how each of you died. How each of you became so fragile and broken. And how eventually you had to be picked up. And the God of your understanding had to stoop down and pick you up and bring you to the place of rest where you are today. And some of you probably were in jail, and some of you were in a hospital, and some of you were in your kitchens, some of you were on the freeway. I don't know anything about you. But I'm here to tell you that I was in a very sheltered environment when I reached my moment. And Scotty talked about the loneliness of the alcoholic. The loneliness where everything on the outside looks like it could be performing quite well. But the loneliness in the heart of the alcoholic, I don't know that there are any words to describe that, just like Bill W. says on page 8. He says that no words can describe the loneliness and the bitter morass of self-pity that he found himself in, when it felt like quicksands had stretched out on all sides of him, and alcohol had become his master, and it was in control of him. And now he had met his match. That was his moment. And it would be very interesting to me to find out and know from you what your moment was. And these people with whom I lived were there for me, but I didn't know, and I was dying. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll pray more. Did any of you try to pray when you were drinking? You know, God, if you get me over this one, I will never do it again. If you can just... you know, folks, I never intended to not drink. I really didn't. I never intended to give up alcohol, because I thought alcohol was just my little ace in the hole over here. That was the only thing that I hadn't given up, I thought. You know, I felt I had given up everything else. And so I thought, you know, I've got to have this little drink. I can't not have this. And so I decided to pray. And when I was praying, I didn't use these words, but this is what I was praying for. I was praying that God would somehow help me to control and enjoy my drinking. Now, our book tells us that we can't do that. At least for me, when I controlled my drinking, I never enjoyed it. And when I enjoyed my drinking, I could never control it. That's just the way it happened. But the book says that it's the great obsession of every abnormal drinker that somehow, someday, she will learn how to do that. She'll learn how to control and enjoy her drinking. And so I decided to go to the north of California and make a 30-day retreat where I was praying for 30 days and fasting. And I thought that at least the obsession would leave me, the craving, and I could get this thing down where I wouldn't be, you know, doing Willie Nelson's song, "You're Always on My Mind." I don't think he was singing about alcohol, but, you know, it was always in my mind. Morning, noon, night. When am I going to get my drink? When am I going to start? Where can I get enough? Where can I go so that I can get it? Awfully difficult. And so I decided to pray. And on day 15, the retreat director said, I will give you a break today. You don't have to pray the whole 30 days. Just take a break today. And the other people said to me, is there any place special you'd like to go today? And I said I would like to visit the Napa Valley. As some of you know, that's where the wineries are. And so I thought if I could visit the wineries, I could get to see what the wine tasted like in the Napa Valley, and then I'd be okay. And I came back that evening feeling no pain and waking up the next morning on day 16 with the worst hangover I ever had, with all the mixture of wines, thinking that on day 30 I would be able to get rid of this obsession. And on day 30 I wanted to drink more than I wanted to do anything else in the world. And I came back from that retreat feeling a total and complete failure. And God was somewhere. I think God was here or somewhere else. God certainly didn't seem to be. I was very angry with God. And sometimes I offend people when I say this. And I hope that you'll forgive me if I do, because I can get in the airplane today and you won't be able to catch me. But what I used to do when I was angry with God, we have a little chapel in our convent. And I would get up at 2:12. Do you ever wake up at 2:12 on the digital clock? And all you want to do is drink. Now, I knew if you drank at 2:12, you definitely would be an alcoholic, and that's what I was trying to avoid. And so at 2:12, I would get up sometimes, and I would go down to our little chapel. And I would be so angry with God. And I'd say, what did I not do right? What was it that I didn't do or I did do? And then I would get very upset and very mad and very angry. And then I would give God the finger. And I would say obscenities to God, and I was very upset. And, when I think of that, I often think about the poem, and some of you would know that, called The Hound of Heaven, where the soul tries to escape from God, and God is in the image of the hound who's chasing the person all the time and just wants that person to belong to him. And it was just like, I was at the point of where it says, naked I wait thy love's uplifted stroke. My harness piece by piece thou hast hewn from me and smitten me to my knees. I am defenseless utterly. And that's exactly where I was. And I was standing in our living room one day, and I was looking at a book that's put out for nuns, and it's called Sisters Today. And there was an ad on the very back page, and it says, Sister, are you concerned about your drinking? If so, please call this number, collect. Now, out of 140,000 sisters then in the United States, according to statistics, there are 15% of us who have this disease, but less than 1% of us is getting any kind of help. And so I consider it to be a miracle that I get to stand in front of you as a recovering alcoholic. I made this phone call to a recovery center in Massachusetts, and it was 9 o'clock in California, and it was midnight in Massachusetts. And I spoke to this lady who was wonderful to me, and she answered a lot of questions. And I told her a lot of lies because I didn't know how to tell her the truth. I told her I was moving into a new job, which was true, from being a school principal into the diocesan job I have today. And I told her I would be involved in a lot of counseling with other nuns, and I would be working with priests, and, a lot of them were drinking, and I didn't know how to deal with their drinking. And she said to me, oh, that's too bad, and I'll send you some literature, and I'll send you some tapes, and I'll tell you about recovery centers, and there is an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous. And she told me all this, and I thought if I could find out how to get this thing down to a science, I could probably, know how to stop drinking as much myself. And then at the very end of the conversation, she said to me, Sister, would you like to tell me a little bit about your own drinking? I will never know why they're so smart in Massachusetts. But she said, a marvelous thing that we all get to do in this program. And she said, I can hear pain in your voice. That always touches me because through the grace of this program, we get to see the pain on one another's faces. And we get to hear the pain in one another's voices. And then we get to be part healers of this disease. And she heard the pain in my voice. And I was able to tell her that I was dying. And I didn't know anybody in my whole environment to whom I could talk to. I couldn't talk to a soul that I knew and tell them about this. And she said, well, you might want to try to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I was so important in those days, and I just didn't think I could possibly go to AA without being found out. So what I did was I decided to go to some AA meetings a long ways away from where I lived. And my first AA meeting was a 10 o'clock morning meeting in a place called Whittier, which is a little journey from where I live. And I always remember what I did. I changed from, we were then wearing a kind of a modified nunny habit. And I changed from my nunny clothes into regular clothes, and I put on a whole bunch of eye makeup. and I went down to a place called Serenity Hall in Whittier. And it was a little club about the size of just this little area here. And it was very dark and dreary, and it seemed like there were lots of little old men shuffling around. That's all I remember. And there was a lot of smoke. And there was a man who was sharing his experience, strength, and hope at the podium. And he said something like he would sign court cards after the meeting. And I didn't know what court cards were. And I thought that I would have to go out and get a court card so that I could get to stay there. And then he was fascinating to me, this gentleman was, and he started to use language that I punished the 8th graders for writing on the bathroom walls. And one word he used a lot, it begins with sh, which I'm sure you have never heard here, but he used that word a lot. And then he graduated into another word that starts with th. And it was very interesting to me how he could use the th word. He could use the th word in sentences. In fact, he could use it in different kinds of speech, like he could use it as a noun, he could use it as an adjective, he could use it as an adverb, he could use it with ed on the end, with ing on the end, and on one occasion he used it with mother before it. And I looked at him and I remember thinking, and this is going to be my spiritual leader for the rest of my life. And when he was all through, he said, "Looking back, it worked." And I can remember what I did after the meeting was over, and Scotty talked about this last night. God, I identified with this. When we all stood, I was afraid to hold hands with these people. I truly was. I was afraid. But when I was holding hands with these people at the end of the meeting, there was something that happened when we were saying the Lord's Prayer. And but I didn't want to go back, and I didn't want to be an alcoholic. And I remember I got into my car, and I was upset. I was crying. And I looked at myself at the stoplights in the rearview mirror, and all this stuff I had on my eyes was coming down my face. And I remember I said the sh word and the f word all the way home. And I work with the bishop all day long, priests and nuns, and it's really not appropriate for me to be doing this stuff. I have to be careful so that I can act appropriately. So it's interesting to me, though, how little I could catch on, to this thing. Now, I don't know. I just die with embarrassment when I tell you that in my bottom drawer at home I've got pieces of paper, and they're called degrees. And you see, I thought there was some way that this simple program could be designed to fit me because I knew all this stuff. I never had any problem with God in the sense that I had a relationship with God. I believed in a God, but God was God, and I was Mrs. God, and I was in charge. That's all. That's what I remember the most. And all I had to do was tell God exactly what he was supposed to do, and that was it. And here I was. And I kept going back to some meetings, and I didn't want to. And I heard weird things. Now, for you new people who are here today, you will hear weird things at meetings. And I got sober in December of 1978, and I heard weird things before Christmas in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like they were saying to me, "Don't drink." Now, Christmas was one of the few legal times in my life where nobody would pay any attention. I could do it 10 days before Christmas, 10 days after Christmas, all during, Christmas was a good drinking time for me. And the people in AA were saying, "Don't drink." And they were saying, "Go to meetings." I didn't think there was anything at a meeting that you could give me because unlike my friend over here called Calamity, I come from the north of Ireland, and I have another disease, and it's called arrogance. Now, he doesn't have that. They're all clapping at you because you don't have it, but I do. And the arrogance says that you know things a wee bit more and better than everybody else. And so I just thought there was nothing at meetings that I could ever learn that I didn't already know. How could you possibly teach me what I already know? And then they were saying, read the book. Now, I read the book. Now, English was my major at the University of London. And I didn't care for the way they wrote the book. So what I did was I took the book down to the beach and I corrected it so that I could have it for you people someday, the new edition, a la Sister B. And I fixed the sentences and, you know, the grammatical errors and the awkward sentences. And God, I fixed this thing up good so you could have this. And I went down to Serenity Hall in Whittier and I told them that the syntax offended my sensibilities as an English major, and they just looked at me with great kindness and they said, keep coming back, Bea. And then they were talking about I had to get a sponsor. Now, sponsorship was very difficult for me because I had a problem with trust. I couldn't trust anybody. And how was I going to tell one of these old biddies about myself? I didn't care for that idea at all. So what I did was I would interview ladies and I would hire them, and then when I didn't like what they were telling me, I would get rid of them. I'd fire them. And it was real hard for me. It was very, very hard for me. And then they were saying, work the steps. But again, I didn't think there was anything in the steps that I didn't already know. See, my personal opinion is that people like me who have all this stuff, today I call it stuff. Sometimes it's useful stuff, but it's stuff. I sponsor a lot of people, and the people who can neither read nor write, who don't know anything about God, they're always the most teachable. Always. People like me, you know, you ask questions, and then they'll say things to you, oh, Bea, we don't analyze, we utilize. Get rid of her fast. You know, I'd ask questions. I had a few wonderful gurus or mentors or people who are kind enough to be patient with me. Paul O., who has written in our big book, was a wonderful friend of mine. He's written Dr. Addict and Alcoholic, and he answered my questions. God bless Paul. He answered my questions. He would act like I was intelligent. And now he says he used to laugh at some of the things I would ask because he knew there was no answer, but he would try to answer me. And it was very important for me to get some questions answered. I went to Serenity Hall one morning and I was crying. I was always crying there. In fact, they used to call me the Crying Nun. And I was crying not the way I cry today. I cry today from gratitude a lot. But I was crying from anger and frustration and resentment and fear and all the stuff. And this man came to me after the meeting and he said, Bea, he says, you know, I've noticed you're always unhappy. And this program is supposed to help us to be happy, joyous, and free. Well, you could have fooled me. I didn't know that. And I told him, I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be an alcoholic, and I don't want to work the steps, and I don't want to go to meetings, and I don't want to read the book, and I don't want to get a sponsor. I told him all that I don't want it. And he was so kind. This man, he's a wonderful member of AA, and he was so kind. And he said to me, Bea, you know, this might work for you. He said, go home today, and go to your room and close the door, and kneel on your knees, and ask God to give you the willingness to change your attitude. Now, with all of the learning, all of the courses, all of the seminars, all of the education, all of the scripture studies, all of the stuff that I had absorbed inside of me, I had never heard anybody saying that to me. And so I was in such terrible emotional pain. And I always like to share this because sometimes there's just one of you who might be in this kind of pain. I knelt on my knees, and being as dramatic as I am, I'd love to tell you that there was a burning bush, and there were angels singing, and there was a rainbow, and God appeared. Didn't happen like that at all. But I'm here to tell you two things. That when I do pray for willingness, when I get stuck in sobriety, you know when you get stuck in the program and you're what I call in-between surrenders, and there's just one more thing you have to do or let go of, or one more amend you have to make, or one more resentment you have to work through. That's called in-between surrenders when you're uncomfortable. And when I knelt on my knees and I asked God to please give me the willingness, what He didn't do was, He didn't give me the willingness up until 1995. He just gave me the willingness for that day. And I believe that God gives me just enough willingness for Sunday, September 3rd, 1989. That's just all I get, just enough for one day. He's kind of stingy about that. And the other thing I discovered was that God always, always, always answers me when I pray for willingness. But sometimes I'm not willing to pray for willingness, see, because I don't want to change. I would rather stay in that, whatever it is, until I'm just good and ready to get out of that. So sometimes I have to pray for the willingness to be willing to be willing. I started to pray for the willingness, folks, and I'll tell you, things started to change. Not instantly, obviously not instantly, but little by little, I got to work this blessed program like it was designed. And what I discovered was that I had to do it the same as everybody else. That no amount of wiggling out or wiggling in or talking myself into or out of was going to keep me comfortable, sober and comfortable. And what I've learned as I go around AA, and I'm involved in AA in my own home group, and I'm involved all over the country. And what I've learned is, and I love taking inventory, like maybe one or two of you might like doing too. What I discovered is that there are three types of AA. One is what I call low-life AA. And that is when people come to the program and they just come looking for a relationship, or I could say that in another way, but I won't say it here because you'd look too polite. They just want to do that. And they maybe don't drink, but there really isn't too much seriousness about working a program. And then there's another type of AA, it's what I call the ho-hum type, where, it's just, well, we've got our jobs and our families are back together again. Not drinking, but this joy of living bit, that we're promised, there's none of that around. And then there's the third kind. The third kind is what I'm after. The third kind is what I call the classy kind. And the classy kind is where I found the joy in the steps of the program. And as far as I understand it, the joy of the program was found for me when I discovered the promises that are hidden in the steps of the program. And what I've discovered only in the last couple of years, I'm sorry to tell you because of my lack of awareness and my lack of consciousness and my holding on, what I discovered was that there are 84 promises all stuck in there, hidden in the steps. And so what I had to be taught, and I had to learn, and I had to become teachable to, was to learn how to read page 62 like, B, this is the how and the why of it. You have to quit playing God because it doesn't work. And hereafter in this drama of life, God is going to be your director. He is the principal and you are His agent. He is the Father and you are His child. And most good ideas are real simple, B. But this concept is the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which you will pass to freedom. What fascinates me is that on page 62, the word selfishness or self-centeredness is mentioned 13 times. And on page 63, there are 13 promises as a result of taking step 3. And the first one, I think, goes something like this. When we do that, when we let go and let God be in charge and let God direct us, all sorts of remarkable things follow. Can you believe that? Can you believe a remarkable thing that can follow? Remarkable things for me might sound real weird to you. We had our first business meeting of the year in my community the day before yesterday. A remarkable thing is that I didn't have to stir up confusion and disharmony. The remarkable thing for me is when I can keep my mouth shut and my opinion to myself. A remarkable thing for me is when I can live and let live. A remarkable thing for me is when I can do one day at a time. A remarkable thing for me is when I can act in a loving way whether I want to or not. That's remarkable things are following. And so what I found out through page 63 in my sponsors was that, guess what, B? You have a new employer. Oh, a new true employer. And this one that you have is all-powerful and is going to provide what you need. And the only condition for that is stay close. Stay close to him and perform his work well. And so the promises of step 3 go on. And as a result of doing step 4, taking my inventory and trying to get rigorously honest. I wish they hadn't said rigorous. You know, honest is one thing, but rigorously honest means you have to keep illuminating all the cracks, like it says in the book. And as a result of rigorous honesty, it tells me that there are 6 promises for me. 6. Can you believe that? Something like I'll be able to change calamity into serenity. Imagine, my whole life was calamity, especially inside of me. And I'll be able to outgrow fear. And that if I'm in resentment, that God's going to take me by the hand and He's going to teach me. He's going to teach me. He's going to say, I'm going to show you, Bea, how you can be kind and tolerant towards this person. Bea, honey, this person is definitely an asshole. It's okay. You know. And my God mentions their names, and sometimes they're clergy persons, too. Bishops now. And, you know, but you have to treat this person just like he or she were sick. And my God teaches me. And that's the payoff. That's the joy of living as a result of these steps. And as a result of step 5, the joy of living as a result of taking step 5, there are 10 of them there on page 75. You know, that somebody like me who is so ashamed, so embarrassed, so afraid, so full of guilt, that I can look the world in the eye. God, what a miracle for us to be able to look the world in the eye. And it even tells us that we'll be delighted. We'll be delighted. And of course, being as Irish as I am, I get into all this, you know, that God is going to be delighted with me too. As a matter of fact, God is going to dance over me. And I'm going to be so happy as a result of doing that. And that I can trip down the broad highway with the spirit of the universe. That's what it promises me on page 75. I want to tell you that I found the God that I understand today, which incidentally is the Father God, when I took steps 6 and 7, when I became entirely ready for God to have God remove my defects. It's hard if you're a saint to admit that you have defects of character. And so I took step 6 and I asked God to help me to be entirely ready. And so I did step 7 on my knees on page 76, and it says, My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. And at that moment, the God that I understand this moment appeared to me. Now, God didn't appear physically right in front of me, but God appeared inside of me. And God was big, and He had a sense of humor, and He was a father, and He was Irish. And He said to me, Bea, are you sure? Are you sure it's okay for you to give yourself to me whether you're good or bad? Is it okay for you not to become perfect for me? And I had to think about that because I had learned rather efficiently, somehow, I don't remember anybody telling me this, and I knew that God was a God of love, but I didn't feel it inside of me. See, I always felt that I was like Holly Hobbie. Do you know what Holly Hobbie looks like? She has freckles and red hair, and she's on those plates and cups and mugs in the Hallmark stores, and she's always by herself, but she says the sweetest things. And I always felt like that God took care of everybody else, but that He forgot about me somehow, because I had been abandoned. And I especially had been abandoned by my father. And so it was really, really hard for me to catch on to any kind of a God who would become a personal God for me. And so I said to God, yes, I think I can. I think I can believe that I can just give myself to you as I am. And God said to me, I want you to be full-time Bea. My name isn't Bea at all, of course. My name is Brea Jean, but there are only 2 people that I know here can say that, so don't call it to me. Malachi and Miriam can call me that, but the rest of you can't. And so he said, Brea Jean, you know, it's okay for you. It's okay for you to have freckles and red hair. It's okay for you to have a dreadful temper. It's okay for you to have... I just love you as you are. just as you are. And I want you to be full-time yourself. And I don't want you to be impressing anybody or me, because you're my kid and I love you no matter what. At that moment in my life, I knew in my innermost being, I knew that God loved me. Now, it isn't that I hadn't heard that. It isn't that I hadn't said that. In fact, I told everybody, you know what? Your God loves you so unconditionally. Your God loves you so much that He has carved your name on the palm of His hand. I would use scripture. And I would say, your God loves you so much that He would even take your tears if you're crying, and He would store them up and He would put them in a little bottle. And every once in a while He would take out the little bottle and He'd say, these are Yvonne's tears. And He would look at them. These are Jeanette's tears. It was a God of tenderness that I presented to everybody. But I didn't think that God ever knew that I ever cried, or that I was ever lonely, or that I was ever into self-worth. I didn't know that God was interested in me that much. And I was trying to prove to God and everybody that it was wonderful. When I took step 7, I became really comfortable with this God of my understanding today. And I know that I have a Father who provides really well for me. I shouldn't be standing in front of you this morning because I think I got about 3 hours sleep last night. And when I woke up this morning early, because I'm in California time, my body has this little cough. So I wake up at 4. I get up at 4 every day because I go to a morning meeting at 6. And I swim and I pray before I go to my meeting every day. And so I said, God, I don't know for sure if I'm going to be able to do this. And I heard God saying to me very clearly, Jean, I'm going to provide what you need for you today to do. I'm going to provide everything you need for this day. And I have a real sense as I'm standing here in front of you that I'm being provided with everything I need. It's a marvelous feeling. Because I've had these wants, I want this, and I want it to be that way. I have wants, no problems, because I have what I need. And so this God of my understanding continues to be gracious to me, continues to love me so unconditionally, continues to demonstrate or show off through people like you what He can do. And when I see God showing off through people like you, I know that God will show off through me, and it's marvelous. And I went on to experience, and I continue to go on to experience this thing called the joy of living, through steps 8 and 9, when I wrote my list of the people I had harmed and tried to make my amends to the best of my ability, and I was able to really experience a new freedom and a new happiness and not regret the past. Oh my gosh, if anybody had asked me in 1978, is this what you really want to do with your life? You want to be an alcoholic? I didn't want to be an alcoholic. And as it says on page 100, when we look back at the things that we put in God's hands, we realize that they've turned out so much better. And what I know about myself today, when I put God into this little case, and I close the door, and I limit God, because my God was too small. My God is immense, all-embracing, ever-inclusive, and never exclusive. Roomy, broad, is the realm of the Spirit. What a wonderful God, what a wonderful higher power we get to have here. And if anyone were to say to me, all the learning is here, and all the money is here, or to any of us, we go where all of that is. And what we find out is that all the power. I leave for Australia a week from tomorrow. And, 2 weeks from tomorrow. And I'm going to conduct a seminar type thing for a bunch of nunny bunnies out there. And I've had a real difficulty finding time to do some preparation. And God has equipped me. God has equipped me through you, through people like you who have worked the program and have given me the book and the steps. Now, these people are not, according to what they tell me, I don't think they're alcoholics. But this program equips us to do living that causes and conditions that set us up to where we are today. I'm always fascinated for a woman who comes from the border, the north of Ireland, Malachy, what the promises of step 10 can do. As we continue to take the inventory, we make our amends and we promptly admit that we're wrong, and we get rid of the 4 things that can upset us, like resentment and selfishness and dishonesty and fear. We get rid of that stuff, and we keep the vigilance. We keep vigil. That's what it tells us on page 84. We keep vigil constantly. And what it promises me is that we'll stop fighting everything and everybody. Imagine a girl from the north of Ireland stopping fighting. Miracle. Because I was born to fight. I was born to win, whether I was winning or not. And I was born to prove and to compete. And the marvelous place that I have been placed by my God today, another promise which says that we will be placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I used to think, neutrality? Whoever needs that? That's being wimpy. Neutrality for me today is in a position of self-assertiveness in the very best sense, where I can look the world in the eye, I can own the space for my 2 feet, and I can believe that my God loves me completely. I can be appropriately assertive. That's what the position of neutrality is for me, that I don't have to win, I don't have to prove, I can say my truth, and I can let everybody leave in dignity. And God knows I don't always do that, but that's what the program has given me the ability to do a lot of times, a position of neutrality. And I'm told what our code is. In the community that I live in, they said to me the other day, well, I guess what we're going to have to do this year, we're going to have to do the AA code. I love that. And they know, even though I hardly ever talk, I hardly ever talk out loud to them about the program per se, but they know that on page 84 that the code is written. It says that love and tolerance of others is our code. The code of Alcoholics Anonymous. The code that takes us anywhere we ever would have to go. The code that takes us to the marketplace. The code that takes us on the airplane. The code that takes us anywhere. That people would know by the way we are that love and tolerance of other people is our code because we're different. I'm embarrassed to tell you I used to teach prayer, I still do, teach prayer and meditation. And I was taught prayer and meditation by my 2 wonderful sponsors and also by pages 86 and 87 when I'm told really simply what I have to do when I wake up. Because when I wake up it's dangerous, real dangerous, because my head starts, my committee, as Dr. Paul says, moves in. And the committee starts jabbering away to my head. And they can be sitting at the bottom of the bed. Often they're sitting at the bottom of the bed waiting. And they're saying, Bea, wake up, hurry up, because we've got to get him. We've got to move here. And so it says on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead, just today. And then we consider our plans for the day. Gently consider our plans for the day. And before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Now, what I consider my own thinking to be is like, my head is like a jigsaw puzzle sometimes that's scattered, very scattered, fragmented, all over the place. And one of the favorite meditations that I have is I close my eyes and I try to imagine the God of my understanding putting me back together again. Say, okay, baby, we put this over here. Now, we don't have to do this until 2 weeks from Monday. In fact, you won't even have to do it until a few days after that, so don't worry about that right now, okay? So, and that happened last year, so it's over, and you don't have to worry about that. So God takes my thinking and He puts it back together again. And what my sponsors tell me, especially my man sponsor, Deke, who is 37 years in the program, he says, Bea, the thing you need to do the most, tells me so gently, he says, Bea, you need to pause. Pause. I was sharing with my friends yesterday that I experienced a TIA. Ever experienced a TIA? It's called a temporary insanity attack. I would never say that to anybody but you, but TIA sounds wonderful. It sounds like you have something wrong with your leg or your back or something. So I got this little TIA the other day, and the way it happened to me was I became overwhelmed. I looked at my calendar and I started to shake. So, God, how am I going to do all this before? And then I made a commitment to live Friday. Just do Friday. And I also made a commitment to take 1 hour during the day out of everything I was doing and spend it with God. And when I did that, even though I was distracted during the hour, when I finished doing that, I got a lot of energy, got a lot of answers, got a lot of creativity, I got a lot of good ideas. And so the answer seems to be for me, because I'm an active alcoholic, not actively practicing the disease, but active in my head. I do thinking now instead of drinking, if you know what I mean. And so what happened to me was that I learned that as a result of pausing, that God can take care of this. What it promises me in step 11 is that what used to be the hunch, Isn't this wonderful for an Irish woman? What used to be, we're full of hunches, those of us who are Irish, or even Irish backgrounds. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. What a gift this is. And we get to develop what the book says, this vital sixth sense. Because now we're living in the realm of the spirit. We're in another place in our whole psychic self. And it keeps promising. And what promises me that when I get excited and agitated, never do agitation when you don't look like you ever were agitated, but what agitates me is I go to the bank, and they're always training in a new girl. Always. And she's young, usually about, very young. Probably I taught her mother, And she's wearing all kinds of rings, and she's got these nails and the hair, and she's got jewelry, and she's got eyelashes, but she doesn't know what she's doing, and she's dealing with our money. And I would love to tell her, how to do the bank. And I have to wait until she learns her job from this other gal. And I tell you, this is the truth, and I don't know what God's trying to teach me, probably some patience, but every time I go to the bank, they're training in a new girl. And what happens to me is that I become agitated, real agitated. And so I have to not do agitation. And what it tells me is that if I can just constantly remind myself that I'm no longer running this show, and say, thy will be done. And then I won't be in danger of all those things, excitement, fear, depression, being overtired even. I won't even be... and it promises me the thing that I always wanted to do the best of all. It promises me that I will become much more efficient. This is a great program that teaches us if we don't do anything, we become efficient. God, can you imagine that? And it doesn't mean not to do the footwork, but don't get into it in your head. Stop planning the results. See? This program is fascinating, and if it weren't, folks, I wouldn't be here. But I continue to learn more and more and more about this every day that I wake up. It's just opening up more and more and more. One of the things I've been doing this year is I've been giving AA retreats on the promises. And every time I do this, I gave one last weekend, I'll be giving one next weekend, and every time I do it, there's a whole other thing that I didn't know about. And it's always new. It's always opening up because, you see, it's full of life, because God's here. That's why. Now, I don't know exactly how the 12th step works, but I know that it does, and I know that as a result of doing step 12, that we experience the spiritual awakening. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, all of them, that we get to carry the message. As a result of step 12, to my knowledge, there are 25 promises. And they're in pages 89 and on, if you want to find them, if you haven't already done so. One of the best ones of all, for me, is that it will take away loneliness. Oh, God, isn't that wonderful for us? We won't be lonely anymore. Because we get to carry this wonderful message, and we get to share our own experience, strength, and hope with other people. And God then starts to work. He takes care of the heart of our disease, which is terrible, terrible loneliness. And we won't be bored. And we get to see people wake up, and we get to see people live again. We've experienced ourselves, we've experienced death, and then we get to experience resurrection in ourselves and in other people. And so the promises go on, and so they go on. And I'm learning more and more and more every single day that I live about this program. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie called Beaches. Well, there's a wonderful song in a movie called Beaches. And I would like to say to you who have been in this program for many, many years before me, and who have kept the traditions of the program so that I could be here, and who have worked these steps, and have passed them on, I would like to tell you, as I fly around this world that God has placed me in, I want to say to you that you will be the wind beneath my wings. And for that, I love you, and thank you, and God bless you.